In that time, there's just a few professional drivers in 1954, 1953. So to hear this kind of things for me, having lunch with this guy in that moment in England was very, very unforgettable moments, of course, because all the work that I've been making took meaning. It was very important.
Hi there, everybody. Welcome to Horsepower Heritage. My name is Maurice Merrick, and greetings to all of you listening from places like Milton, Vermont, Trumbull, Connecticut, Bradford, Ontario, Canada, Morgantown, West Virginia, Carcassonne, France, Madrid, Spain, Alice Springs, Australia, and Devon, England, just to name a few. It's good to know you guys are listening all over the globe. Thanks for being here, and don't forget to follow, rate, and share the show, and leave me a quick review if you're listening on Apple Podcasts. Well, today my guest is a guy named Danilo Coto, and he's the founder of a company called Pacto Helmets. That's Pacto. Pacto makes exacting reproductions of period racing helmets, the kind worn by legends like Juan Manuel Fangio, Sterling Moss, and Jim Clark. And every helmet is made by Danilo's own hand. It all started with his passion for vintage motorcycles. After many years of hard work, Pacto helmets are now worn all over the world by drivers in vintage events like the Mille Miglia. So if you're a lover of the golden age of racing, you're going to enjoy this one. The full story is coming up right after this. Today's episode of Horsepower Heritage is sponsored by Model Citizen Diecast. And if you like scale model cars, they've got a special deal for my listeners. Whether you're looking for race cars or street cars, they've got something you'll like in itty-bitty 1/64th scale all the way up to the ginormous 1/8 scale masterpieces from the Amalgam Collection. You can see it all at modelcitizendiecast.com, and when you use the promo code HERITAGE at checkout, you'll get 10% off your order. Limitations apply. Model Citizen Diecast, because your inner child still wants to play with cars. Danilo, thank you so much for being with me today. I'm really excited to talk to you because I first saw a Pacto helmet on the back of a C-Type Jaguar at a car show a number of years ago. And I thought to myself, that is an amazing vintage helmet. And the owner of the car said, as a matter of fact, it's not vintage, but it's very authentic.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to your podcast. I'm very happy to talk about my passion about helmets. And yes, I've been trying for years to make a piece that you can wear and feel it and smell it exactly as the old days. Is you can find many products in the market right now, but I think I put a lot of details on my products about buckles, type of leather, vinyls, colors, anything I can try to make it as soon as original ones. Yeah.
Right. So the helmets are amazing, like I said, and the attention to detail that you put into your products is very impressive, but that didn't happen overnight. Let's talk about why this is interesting to you in the first place. I understand that you've always been a motorcycle guy and you enjoy history, of course, and historic motorsport. So let's talk about your background a little bit.
Yeah, I had a Ford 55 when I was in college. I drove this car for 25 years. After that, I bought my first bike. It was a German bike. I couldn't finish this bike, but this bike was the start with the real connection of vintage motoring. So I started buying parts and more bikes. And it was very difficult because those bikes were in very, very bad conditions. In that time, only just a few vintage Harley Davidson were driving correctly in that time. So I decided to start rebuilding the first not Harley Davidson bike in my country. So I started with a club. I was the founder of the Vintage Costa Rica Motorcycle Club. And I enjoyed very much. We made a group. I have some invitations from other countries to visit, for example, Germany in that time, because I was very focusing in vintage German motorcycles. So That's a way my first connection with vintage stuff. After that, I bought the first bike, and the guy who sold the bike had a vintage German helmet. So this was my first connection with the vintage helmets. So I saw the helmet. I have never ever been see a vintage helmet in my life. So I was impressed how it was made, and I was thinking, wow, it would be very cool to drive my bike with this kind of stuff, because it's not easy to find in other places. So I started collecting vintage helmets for years. It was about 25 years ago. This was my first collection with vintage helmets in that time. Yeah.
And by the way, was that bike a Zundap?
Yeah, that bike was the Sundap KS601, very rare bike. Costa Rica was a very important country for vintage motorcycles. So Sundap, NSUs, Horex, and many other big German bikes, because the quality, the reliability of these bikes are amazing. For example, NSU was pre-war, was maybe the most important motorcycle manufacturer in Europe, and Costa Rica was the main dealer in America. Argentina and Costa Rica, even US, importing a little less than Costa Rican bikes. So we had a very good dealer for NSU. So even now you can see some small bikes right in the country. The famous Quicklies and the Fox and the Supermax. Those bikes are amazing bikes, good quality, fast, and very well constructions.
So as a young man, you got into these vintage motorcycles, and of course you wanted your own vintage helmet, but they weren't around.
Yeah, absolutely. In my first visit, it was my first trip to Europe. In my first visit, I was invited from the NSU Consul Club. Consul is one of the models from NSU, the 500. And I had an invitation from the NSU Consul, and I was there for my first time in Europe. So when I was there, I talked the guy who invited me that will be cool to find a guy who can sell me a vintage helmet. So I bought my first helmet there in German, and I was very, very happy. And that's a first connection with the vintage helmets, and I started collecting. It was 25 years ago, and after maybe 15 years, I decided, why not to make a helmet? It would be very cool for me to ride one of my vintage bikes with a kind of vintage helmet. It took me 3 years, this idea to be done, to have my own helmet in my hands. It was very, very difficult because the materials was very hard to find here in Costa Rica. The cork, the rivets, the rubber parts, the style of the stitches in the leather was very hard to find people who can make one helmet for me, because it was just an idea. If you go to a shop and asking for these kind of things, and the shops doesn't like to make just one piece for you, because it's very expensive, because they have to take a lot of time. But I was very lucky to find the right people that can help me. And of course, many of Latin culture are not very ready or not very focused on make a very perfect pieces. They make, for example, belts. Maybe some stitches are not very straight. So I have to explain to these people that you have to make it perfect always.
Yes. So I know what you're saying. In Latin America, a certain amount of imperfection it's acceptable. It's that nature of the handmade item.
Absolutely.
And so it's just a cultural difference.
Yeah. And my market will be very exclusive. If they pay for this kind of items, they will expecting to have a very, very good quality details of your product. So that's why I was very focused on make it not perfect, but very well made, with perfection as much as we can,
Right. In other words, you don't want it to look machine made, or mass produced, but you want to have a very high level of precision in a handmade product.
Absolutely.
But now, Danilo, at that point, you're not even thinking about producing these to sell. You're just looking to get one for yourself.
Yes. In that time, I was just very happy to make one helmet for me and ride one of my bikes with wearing my helmet. Yeah. When I decided to make my first helmet, I had to imagine everything. I have to imagine how to put my rubber, because the rubber that this helmet were made or used are very different than the rubber trims, for example. So I have to imagine every piece of the helmet, because it's very different when you see a vintage helmet on your hands, and it's very different to imagine how to make it. I was wondering every day how to put my rivet, the machine that you can use to put the rivet, because there are thousands of difference of machines that can put a rivet, handmade, press, air press. I don't know. It's hard to imagine this kind of thing. So for example, the rivets. I remember when I bought my first rivet, I was very frustrated. I didn't know how to order or how to look for rivets, solid rivets or semi-solid or tubular semi. Now I know, but in that time I didn't know. So I bought many different kind of rivets. And after I decide, well, maybe these rivets can work. But now I have to imagine the machine to put these rivets. And one day I decide to email a guy who make vintage Tonka cars. I don't know if you remember these toys. I have a problem. I need to put a rivet. I explain him, but the main concern is because the rivets needs to be very into the helmet. So I need a reach to reach these rivets with a long arm. He understood what I'm looking for. So he made by his hand a special tool for me. This very simple tool is the tool that I always use to make the helmets. Even now, 11 years after, is the same tool. And after that, of course, the problems continue with me about the rubber, about the cork, about how to find the leather, because the leather is very special. It's not a regular leather. All the racing helmets were made in pig leather, because the hair of the pig is bigger, so the air flows easily. So I have to find the right leather, so I have to import leather. But it was very difficult, of course, because the colors, because of the textures, the softness or the stiffness of the leather. And finally, I joined all the items and made my first helmet for me. Yeah.
Can we talk about how you produced the shell for the first time?
Yeah, the shell, I was very lucky because there's only helmet manufacturers in whole Central America that was here in Costa Rica. In the late 60s, the guys from AGV Italy made a deal with the Costa Rican people, and they start to produce AGV helmets here in Costa Rica. But the factory is still in 10 years, 11 years ago. So I was very lucky because I talked with the owner. The company was very small. And I asked him, can you make a shell for me? And he says, we don't like to make different shells that we made, because it's licensed and it's our market, But how many helmets you want? And I said, just one. And just one is very difficult, because it will be very hard to make just one shell for you. So I start trying to be friendly with him and explain him my passion that I want one helmet that is very different than the new helmets, because the bikes and the vintage, etc. So finally, he was very nice. He was an Italian guy, and we made the first helmet. Of course, the problems again, because the weight of the helmet, because the type of the fiber glass of the helmet that I was looking for, even the kind of shapes, because when you see a vintage helmet, it's not as smooth as the new one. The new ones are very smooth, it's like a kind of glass, But the vintage is more rough, it's not very smooth. So I tried to make the paint process like the old days. So finally, we made the first shell and painted. Yeah, it was very good.
The shells are fiberglass, right?
Fiberglass, yeah. You can find many different fiberglasses because the weight of the fiber is even the holes or the threads of the fiberglass are different. So you have to use the right one, because some shells needs a little flexible. It's not very stiff. It need to be open. There's a very famous pictures of Wolfgang von Trips before, of course, his crash, when he is pulling out his racing helmet to put it on. So the shell needs to be flexible.
I've seen that picture. Great photo.
Oh, really? Yeah,
Yes.
absolutely. Love it. I use a lot this picture because it's the right way to put it on.
Can we talk a little bit about the actual history of these helmets in their
Yeah.
time period? So just so listeners understand, what are the time periods we're talking about in terms of the vintage helmets that you produce?
Okay, I'm very focused in pre-war in the 50s and maybe late 60s. This is my range. The first company in Europe to make racing helmets was James Gross company. James Gross made many different sports items like boxing products, like fishing products, athletic, basketball, football, many sports. But James Gross was one of the biggest company in the pre-war in the 30s. So he started making the famous helmets for the TT in Isle of Man for racing motorcycles. Of course, these helmets became famous after Lawrence de Arabia had a big crash in his very special motorcycle, Rough Superior. Of course, he was a military guy and very well known. And of course, his bike was very special, the most fast and expensive bike that you can buy in the whole world.
So after T.E. Lawrence crashed his Rough Superior and was killed, the motorcycle community in England started to think more about safety and began to look for helmets to use, right?
Yeah. And in that time, the crash helmets were very small. It was not made of fiberglass. Fiberglass starts after the mid-50s. In that time, they decided to make the helmets by shellac material. It was a very hard material to handle because you get dirty immediately, because it was difficult because you have to put a lot of different layers of this shellac material. It's very sticky material, and were made companies by Gross, of course, by Cromwell. Cromwell was a very important company in pre-war. And also Herbert Johnson started to selling some special helmets made by other companies. Herbert Johnson was a store, a hatter store where you can buy products, but not a company name, but was very famous. Maybe the most famous name in F1 early days helmet.
And by the way, shellac, a lot of people don't know this, but it's a natural material. It comes from insects.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very hard process. Even now, if you want to make a shellac shell, it's very hard because you put the hot iron over the shellac to make the smoother surfaces. It's a headache. It's absolutely hard to make, but it's because many of that commercial helmets in the pre-war were covered with leather to make it smoother and more beautiful, because the finish of the shellac is very hard. It's not very beautiful.
What this makes me think of is the pith helmet.
Pith? What do you mean pith?
So, por ejemplo, los soldados de Inglaterra.
Yeah.
So in India.
Yeah, that's probably shellac. Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. There's very little safety in racing pre-war. Yeah. And only after the war, 1950 or so, are they beginning to really think about safety.
Yeah. The first helmet was presented to FIA in 1949 to make the first F1 competition in 1950 in England. And the company who made this first helmet was the company named Ever Oak, but not sold by Ever Oak, sold by Herbert Johnson. Most of the people, not all, but most of the people start wearing these Herbert Johnson helmets with shellac in that time. After 1952, the helmet was mandatory. But in these years, 1950 and 1951, there's a very famous video when Juan Manuel Fangio is telling this situation, that some guys laughing when a F1 guy racing with helmet. And because he was laughing and joking, that guy is scared of crashing, and that's why he's wearing helmets. These kind of things are now very funny because you are more than 150 miles per hour in that time, and you are not wearing a helmet. It's amazing. And no belts and safety belts, and it's amazing.
I did a podcast episode recently about Jackie Stewart. FIA, it's not as if they didn't care. They had to make decisions based on many factors. So, for example, the helmets needed to be protective, but they also needed to be light enough to wear for an extended period. So, they had that balance they had to strike.
Yeah, it's not easy to think about because some guys can drive or race for a long period wearing a heavy helmet, and some others not. That's why, and of course, for example, if you can, for the Bahamas circuit, for example, that was very hot in that moment, but Germany, for example, was very cold. So that's why you can see on pictures that some helmets are full of holes. I don't know if you ever seen in the 50s helmets with full of holes because they need more air and your head stop burning because it's too hot in that circuits in Florida or in
Nassau.
Nassau, yeah. Nassau is one of the hottest, yeah, of course.
When I think of these helmets, I think of Fangio in the Alfa Romeo Grand Prix cars. And
Yeah.
he's wearing a helmet, but he's wearing also a polo shirt and trousers.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He's not even wearing a jumpsuit. So gloves, helmet, and sometimes he's not wearing goggles.
Yeah, it's amazing. I now we can understand how they race that cars, and even with 43 years old, racing these kind of cars, and you are not an athletic guy, but you are very strong, of course. But you don't look like athletic guy than skinny guys that you can see on F1 nowadays, you know?
Yes, Fangio was not a physically impressive person.
Yeah.
But his skill was unbelievable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And also how calm he was behind the wheel. He looks like he was out for a Sunday drive.
He always cool. He always tranquilo, muy tranquilo.
Muy tranquilo, sí.
There's a small detail that I know because the son of the company who made the helmets told me. I received an email from the son of the real person who made that first helmet for racing F1. His name is Bill Vero.
Are you talking about the son of the guy who started Everoak?
Yeah, Everoak, yeah.
Okay.
7 or 8 years ago, I received an email from a guy who wants to meet me, and he invited me to his home because he was very interested to talk with me about helmets. I didn't know that he was the son of the owner of Everoak in the 50s, and he was the guy who modeled for first time the F1 helmet. This guy was based in the Polo helmet, and he makes some changes and make this special peak visor helmet from the Polo helmet. So I said, yes, of course, I would love to meet you. I will visit you in London. It will be fantastic to be with you and talk about helmets. And so I visit him with my wife. So it was very romantic moment. It was very passionate moment because he is a gentleman, of course, like the old days. He was a driver, professional driver. His father was a professional driver. And we start to having lunch in his home, and he started to telling about the real story. I have never, ever heard the real story about helmets because you cannot read from the website or from the books. It's not, the story is not there. The story is with him. He told me his father was a fighter boxing enthusiast. He was a very strong guy. So when you're trying to model these shellac shells, you have to model with an iron that you put in the fire and you heat it and you start modeling. But this is very heavy because it's made of iron, of course. And he was telling me that his father was very strong with big arms. And he remembered in the early 50s, his father making. Can you imagine the owner of the biggest company in the world making one helmet for a driver by the owner of the company by his hand? It's amazing. He was very close in that time with the FIA people, and so they decide to make this helmet together. So we started talking about the machines, the process, the people, the leathers, and of course we talk about the company who sells the helmet. And one of the questions that I made was why the helmet was sold by Herbert Johnson and not by Everoak? Because my father was a very low profile guy. This is an amazing question. Now everybody wants to be very famous with your name, and his father was a low profile guy. Herbert Johnson has a very special store in Bond Street. In that time, Bond Street was very famous for different kind of hats, the gentleman hats. But in this store, in the store of Herbert Johnson, there was a living room for selling helmets. For example, if you were Juan Manuel Fangio or Rodriguez from Mexico, or the Italians, for example,
Alfonso de Portago.
Alfonso de Portago. If you want to buy a helmet, Alfonso de Portago goes to Herbert Johnson, the store in Bond Street, and go to a special room with a bottle of champagne and with the owner of Herbert Johnson. And they sell the helmet in that way, just for him. Because remember that in that time, there's just a few professional drivers in that time, 1954, 1953. So to hear this kind of things for me, having lunch with this guy in that moment in England was very, very unforgettable moments, of course, because all the work that I've been making took meaning. It was very important. And he asked me, for example, what do you think when you are making a helmet? And I answered him, I always think that I am part of your company. I'm your employee, and I'm thinking this helmet will be worn by a professional driver. And we were laughing, and we were very connected each other in that moment, because he's very passionate. Some guys that used to work for companies are not very passionate, just make the works for living. But this guy is absolutely focused and passionate, and he's still making some helmets for friends and for particular people. And I was very happy because he ordered me some parts of the helmets that he cannot make nowadays in London. So I bought to his home visors and buckles and rain visors, and it was very funny. You can imagine that you can sharing these items to the son of the real owner, of the people who invent these helmets. Yeah, very, very special moment for me.
That's very exciting, because that is as close as you can get.
Absolutely. There's no other people in the world. Absolutely. Yeah.
I love the idea of walking into Herbert Johnson, going to a salon in the back of the store, and having a custom fitting, just like you would be buying a tailored suit.
Yeah. There was a special machines. I don't know if you ever seen these machines who measure your head. It's like a metallic hat that you can put your head, and the metallics close, and after he took off and this copy exactly your head shape. It's amazing, this, because it's the same machine for tailor the hats. That's what the hatter was very important. Yeah.
So the original F1 helmets post-war really were developed from a polo helmet.
Yeah, absolutely. From a polo helmet. Yeah. Because Everoak was the polo helmet maker.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. You look at these helmets and immediately they look like polo helmets, but they have many different details.
Yeah. The absolutely. The chin straps are different. The size is different. The cork is different. Many things. Yeah.
By the way, just out of curiosity, is the cork sourced from Portugal?
Yeah. We imported from Portugal.
I've been to a quinta in Portugal that was on a cork orchard. Very interesting. So I've seen this was near Évora.
Okay.
So I've seen up close the process for harvesting cork off the tree. And, Portugal produces something like 90% of the world's cork.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, it's amazing. It's very expensive also.
I'm sure. So once you produced your first helmet and you were satisfied, you started to tell people about it, right? You started to get some interesting attention.
Yeah, after I put my first picture of my helmet in my Facebook, I received an email from a company who sells motorcycle accessories for more than 100 years. That company is Lewis Leathers. Even is the oldest motorcycle accessories store in the world. So I received an email from this guy that he is very interested to make an order from me for helmets for his store in London and for his store in Japan. So this guy is very unique guy. He's the owner of Lewis Leathers, that he can be very focused on details. Absolutely genius in this situation. So he asked me, can you make maybe 3 helmets for me because I want to check the helmets before make an order. There's something special, he told me. There's something special. I have 3 vintage labels from my company from the 50s that I want that you put in your helmets for me. And I said, yes, send me the labels. I will put on my helmets. Of course, the helmet, my name is not not necessary to put, only the label from England. So I make the helmets and sent it to London. He checked some small changes, and fortunately we could make it. The small changes, so he put an order from 100 helmets, 40 helmets for the London store and 60 helmets for the Japan store. And I was impressed because in that time I only made 1 helmet for me, and he sent me the payment in advance, and I was very happy, but I was very nervous also because I don't know how to make 100 helmets. I don't have a shop. I don't have a people who can make this amount of products. And can you imagine each helmet is made with 12 rivets, and 100 helmets with 12 rivets each is a big amount of rivets, for example. So I decided to visit him in London and to meet him with my wife, and I hold his hand when I meet him. I hold his hand and I said, I will send the orders. I don't know when, but I am very serious, and I promise that I will send you the orders to Japan and to London. And he said, don't worry. I trust in your passion. I trust in your work, and I am sure you will send the helmets. Doesn't matter the time, take your time, 6 months, 8 months, a year, don't worry about that. So I was very happy in that moment. And we start a very nice friendship. He is absolutely my mentor. He explained me the market. The market is very, very hard to understand for a normal commercial people. It's different. It's about history. It's about satisfaction. It's about passion. It's about to buy a helmet in the 50s. This is the way that I try to see my market. I remember, for example, when I was invited for a Triumph motorcycle meeting in England, I brought a helmet for a customer, and he started crying when he opened the helmet, and he told me, maybe in the last 25 years, I never ever buy anything special for me. This is the most special thing that I ever buy in the last 25 years, because it's exactly as the helmet that I bought 50 years ago. And these kind of things, this move you to make this better and better and more satisfaction for me, the work that I make. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing rational or practical about this in a business sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
When you got home from London, what was your plan? Did you have one yet?
In that time, before this experience about the helmets, I used to work for a big company in Central America. I'm engineer. I work as an engineer. And for 10 years before, I was very focused in engineer, and my life changed very fast. And then I have money to make 100 helmets for a very unique market. And I didn't know nothing about this market and these people, because they're very different people in this market. So I start making helmets, and I fail with the helmets many times, because when you put the rivets, the helmet are already painted. You not paint after rivets. You paint before rivets and put the rivets after. And if you fail putting the rivets, the whole helmet will be damaged. So you have to make another one to replace it. So I have a big amount of mistakes making the helmet. So I was very frustrated. Now I ever made more than 1,500 helmets in 11 years by my hand in my home. So it was very funny because my house is not big. So my house you can find helmets in everywhere in my house, in the living room, in the dinner area. It was very funny because I have some guests in my house, and hey, what happened here? What are you making? Yeah, I'm making helmets. I have a big order for a England company, so the people can believe it. Yes, it was very funny. Yeah, beautiful moments. The passion, the when you start a business is absolutely fantastic. Yeah, these emotions.
That's wonderful. By the way, the rivets hold the suspension in, is that right?
The rivets hold the suspension and the chin straps.
So all of the internal parts are riveted to the shell.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Very good. I
Yeah.
just want to make sure that people understand that part. And it makes sense when you say that the rivets are recessed, they're inside, because
Uh-huh.
you don't want the rivets rubbing on something.
Yeah, no. The rivets are before the cork.
How long did it take you to fulfill that first order of 100 helmets?
About 10 months. Yeah, and I have to send the whole order, of course, one for Japan and one for England, but at the same time.
Did he specify that he wanted different colors for the helmets, or
Yeah, the helmet for racing was made only in two colors. In the 1955 was the first jet helmet from Aviakit, Louis Leathers. So they made only silver and white. So that's why we make only silver and white. Especially the same color, the same, everything the same. Yeah.
So 10 months is actually not that long for 100 helmets,
You think
handmade.
so?
Oh, yes. I mean,
Normally, I ask for 4 weeks, for a month, for one helmet. Yes, it's because you have all the items together when you are starting the helmet, but the process is slow. But in the meantime, you have some problems with this and with that, and that's why I ask for 4 weeks to make one helmet. Yeah, but when you are making more, it's more easily to make more. It's faster.
so 10 months to fulfill an order of 100 helmets. And what happens next?
Yeah, after this, it was a big step in my career to make 100 helmets for England. And the people start knowing that these helmets were made by a guy in Costa Rica. And in that time, I wasn't connected with cars, only with motorcycles. You remember this helmet was made for cars and motorcycles for racing in the late 50s. So people from different clubs in Italy, in Germany, or even solo person make some orders because they saw some helmets here, some helmets there. 10 years ago, the social media starting very fast, and the people start to connect it more in the world, by pictures and by videos. So it was very helpful for me because the people start follow me in my brand. So I start to receive orders for custom helmets for different fans of Ferrari, of Lancia, or Alfa Romeo. They start making orders for custom logos and names and very unique stripes, something very simple. So I start to see this market more focused, because it's very hard for another company to make one helmet for one person. It's very expensive, it's very hard, but for me, it was very easy.
What you mean to say is that other companies are set up for mass production, but you figured out a way to custom produce them.
Absolutely, yeah. And it was very funny because these people start asking for pictures when I make the helmet. Can you take a picture of you when you put the trim, the rubber trim, and when you put the rivets? It's very important for me to see how you make my helmet, because the project is not only mine, is a project with this customer also. We make the helmet together because in the meantime of the process, the people change their mind. I think that white is too white. I need more of white or more cream. And we can change the helmet, and the people feel free to make this helmet together with a friend. I was very happy because I start to exchange many, many emails and phone calls and messages with the customer before finish the helmet. So it start to make like a friendship with the customer. it was very unique because I enjoyed this very much. And when I visit, for example, Mille Miglia or Goodwood or any rally, and I meet the people with the helmet, when I saw him and he saw me, we start laughing and we are friends. This connection is very nice because the people can feel my passion and I can feel the passion from the customer.
This is the connection that people have with an artisan.
Yeah, yeah,
That's what you've unlocked.
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah,
I love that. There are very few businesses that you can have that connection with your customer.
yeah. I enjoy it very much. Yeah, of course, I receive some emails with very famous people, and I was in shock. I received a phone call from the girl who deal the image of football players, very very famous football players. She told me, my customer is asking for a helmet from you. When I realized that this guy is so famous, I was in shock. Yeah, this guy is really really important in the market. Yeah.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah, very, very cool.
So let's talk about the jet helmet, your first helmet design.
Yeah, the jet helmets. This is the first jet helmet from Europe. The first jet helmet in the world was made in US by McCall and by Bell. But in Europe, the first jet helmet was made by Everoak and sold by different companies, by Les Leston, by Herbert Johnson, by Avia Kit, by the famous rally guy Paddy Hopkirk. This first jet helmet was made in 1958 and worn by motorcycle guys, professional enthusiasts, professional drivers, and by F1 guys. Like maybe the most important in F1 was Jack Brabham. You can see his pictures when he was the world championship in 1959. He's wearing this Everoak jet helmet, maybe sold by Les Leston. Also, Jim Clark wore this helmet in blue. He customized the helmet in blue with the strap visors in silver gray. The helmet is made from big leather inside, but you can adjust the suspension to high or more low the helmet. This helmet is the earlier model without the press snaps for visor. After 1961 or 62, the helmet starts press snap buttons for the visors. But in this moment, the visor should be strapped here and held by clips. That, by the way, this kind of things, I'm the only guy right now to make this correct period helmet with that details. This is the loop for the goggles or for the visor strap or for the rain visor. You can put here, you can hold here with this many of these accessories. And one particular thing is the helmet comes with double chin straps. One is with snap buttons, and then you close with the buckle. The buckle is very very special. We made these buckles in Japan. That's why if you see the whole thing, the whole details, the helmet is exactly as a remake as the old days.
It's beautiful.
Thank you very much.
Do you find that sitting down and making a helmet is a therapeutic?
Yeah, of course. I disconnect absolutely my mind, and I am very relaxed, and I'm thinking and I flow in thinking when I am making the helmet. Yeah.
That's wonderful. It's great that it still makes you feel that way after all this time.
Yeah, it's absolutely great that after 11 years, I feel the same passion.
So Danilo, you've expanded your product line beyond simply helmets. There's some other interesting period pieces that you're now reproducing.
Yeah, maybe 6 or 7 years ago, people start asking me for more products like jackets and boots and special gloves and, of course, visors. And I said, well, I have these products in my mind, but I didn't finish. If you have time, I can try to make special items for you. And he said, yeah, take your time. Don't worry about that. So I was very focused in the correct period racing jacket for in the rain when these cars are open. The people like Sterling Moss and Jim Clark start wearing these special jackets for raining made by Dunlop. You can see Dunlop brands in his jackets, and these jackets were made by oil cotton. So oil cotton is not easy to find. There's only a company, very, very old company in Great Britain, in Scotland, sorry, that can sell these kind of fabrics that you can use. Of course, there's some other cotton, oil cotton that is not done very easily to tailor, But this company in Scotland made these special fabrics. So one of my customers in Italy is also a tailor. So we start dealing. It would be nice to make a jacket in collaboration. We can buy these fabrics from Scotland and make this jacket in Italy. This guy was also my customer, but we starting to be more and more close. And I designed the jacket how they will look with the pockets and the lower collar neck, for example, because when you are racing a car and your windshield is very low, the wind is too much, so you have to button your jacket in a very lower collar, for example. These special details. So we design very close to the Sterling Moss and Jim Clark jacket that he wore in the 50s. So we are still making these jackets, and we are very happy because when you put these kind of things, you see the difference. There's nothing like this in the market. And a guy from Germany also asked me about, why don't you make shoes? We cannot make shoes in Germany because Adidas is protected the market, that nobody can make a vintage shoe similar like Adidas shoe, because Adidas has all the permissions and there's a word for this,
The licensing, or
the license, the license for this kind. All the sports shoes in the prewar were made very similar than the Adidas, because you can make sports like athletic or boxing or basketball or football with the same shoes. It's the same style made by Adidas. And for example, the driving shoes. So he asked me, why don't you should make some shoes for me. So that's the way I start making these special driving boots and driving shoes, exactly the same that they wore in the 60s. Yes.
At a certain point, Pacto's reputation had grown to the extent that you were contacted by the producers of Ford v Ferrari.
Yeah, I was impressed when I received this email, because I don't know if it was a joke or it was serious email. They didn't have the script really done. And he emailed me and he asked me, can I call you? I would love to call you and talk about the helmets that the guy who won Le Mans in 1962, what kind of helmet he wore in 1963 and 1964. Because in the first, in the early days of the process of the film, the story was different. The story changes. So the film focused in 1966 only, the most of the time. But in the early days, when the film was in a script, we'll show you all the story about 1960, 61, 62, 63. And we were talking about the helmets and the colors and the shapes and the manufacturers and many, many, many details of the race. And I was very happy that these people contact me. And I'm in Costa Rica. I'm just a fan of this. I love helmets. I love producing helmets. But I was very happy that they count of my ideas, and he called me and he took the time. And of course, he made an order. That was the most important thing. Yeah, he ordered 6 helmets and jackets and shoes and gloves and many other things for the film. Yeah, in that time, the budget wasn't very big. Another funny thing, after I put some pictures in my social media, Derek Hill, the son of Phil Hill, called me and he said, "Are you serious that the people from Hollywood contact you to make items for the movie?" And I said, "Yes, I'm very happy." And he said, my father was Phil Hill, and my father was very, very connected with Le Mans in 1964. He won the 1962. Can you give me the contact with the producer? Because I would love to work with this movie. Because my father was one of the main persons in Le Mans in the early 60s. And I said, yes, of course. I will give you all the information of these people. And I connect Derek with the producers of the movie. And he were working for months, maybe, I don't know, 6 months, Derek Hill was working with him, and also many other sons of other famous drivers were in the movie. Yeah, when the film was launched in Costa Rica, all the Vintage Car Club were invited to the Sala film, to the cinema, and we saw the movie together. And when some part of the shots, the helmets appeared, we were very, very happy. Yeah, absolutely.
Danilo, on Instagram, people can find you at Pacto Store, Pacto Store. The website is pacto-store.com.
Yes, that's my website. Yes.
Okay, very good. I'm going to put links in my show notes so that
Thank you.
People can click on those and look at your product line and learn a little bit more about Pacto. But I mean, they're beautiful products. And
thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And they're so exciting. These little details mean all the difference. Danilo, I had fun today. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, absolutely. I enjoyed very much.
Good. I'm glad you did.
Muchas gracias. Y
okay.
La pasé muy bien.
Gracias. Mucho gusto.
Okay. Ciao.
Adios.
That's all for this episode of Horsepower Heritage. If you like what you've heard, don't forget to follow the podcast and help me spread the word by sharing the show with your friends. If you want to get in touch, go to the website at horsepowerheritage.com, click on the contact button there, and that'll take you where you want to go. Until next time, I'm Maurice Merrick. Thanks for listening.